Good morning and welcome back to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my weekly roundup of what's going on in the world of biking. And we've got a pretty busy show for you today, actually. The stories we're going to be covering include a cross-party group has been set up for MEPs in the EU Parliament, which will offer some lobbying power for motorcycles direct to that group. A new study shows that e-scooter use is more dangerous than motorcycling. The government here in the UK is looking at vehicle seizure as a new penalty for expired MOTs. A rider managed to trip the same camera 36 times before being banned. We'll have a look at some world and news in brief, as well as some news from the UK. The autonomous Uber and Wave taxis that we may have spotted driving around the capital have now got an operating license. They will start operating for real very soon. A social media post claiming a rider died following a crash has been described as inaccurate and distressing. We'll have a look at the Patritalia issue with Ducati. They followed up their buyout claim, but Ducati themselves have actually announced that they are getting a state-backed investment program. Norton are showing off a new designer showcase for their bikes. The Ukraine has deployed a two-wheel drive electric motorcycle on the front line. Bultaco has been reborn with a rebranded 300 dual sports machine. We'll have a look at that story, and then we'll go on to the in-depth item at the end of the show. Now, Mag's Colin Brown, he's been busy on the internet just recently. He's had a rant about safety experts who say that motorcycling doesn't fit within the safe system scheme, and he suggests, not unreasonably in my opinion, that if it doesn't fit, maybe you need to change the scheme itself. And I'll sort of follow up with that actually by looking at the Connected Motorcycle Consortium, who claim that only 1 in 5 drivers can't see the bike when they looked. Only 1 in 5. We'll have a look at that claim. So set yourselves down, grab yourselves a brew. Stay with me for the next 45 minutes or so whilst I run through these stories. Right, okay, so let's start with the first story of the day. Now, thanks to Malk for sending me this one. 8 bikers from Devon are facing 2 sets of £60 penalties each after failing to buy a £1 parking ticket and being caught out by the ANPR cameras at a lakeside stop in Wales. What were they doing? They were stopped to buy ice creams. Now, there's no suggestion of any deliberate avoidance here. They, as I said, they just stopped long enough to buy and enjoy an ice cream. But the combined bill of £960 is rather excessive. So their frustration is understandable. Now, locals aren't happy either because they say they're being excluded from their own lake, and they're calling for free access to the car parks around this lake to be restored. It's near Bala, by the way. The National Park Authority says the changes were introduced to help manage pressure around Bala Lake, and they're currently operating the parking charges as a pilot scheme. Now, arguably, bikers have become so accustomed to free parking that any attempt to charge feels like a cash grab. But personally, I think there's a strong argument that beauty spots should charge enough to cover, at least basic maintenance, to keep the toilets clean and operational, and to tidy up litter, because unfortunately, of course, people don't put it in the bin. Now, if the question is where the line sits between cost recovery and revenue generation for the council, it's hard to see a nominal £1 charge for a motorcycle as profiteering. Now, the riders argue the parking signs weren't conspicuous enough, which may be the case, but all I can suggest is don't assume that free parking is still free and scan any car park every time you park there carefully, just in case things have changed. The other point I sort of made is, I know it's not the ice cream seller's job to act as an unpaid parking enforcer, but I do wonder why the charge didn't get a mention as the ice creams were being prepared. Anyway, that way the group might have paid for their £1 parking charge and then quite possibly return for another ice cream next year, because they say they've been going there for years. Right, okay, next story. Now, last week I featured this motorcycle. I'll just give you a zoom in look on that. Excuse me. It's Honda's new CB500 retro single. It's destined for India at the moment, and I said it wouldn't have looked out of place in a bike showroom half a century ago. And as I also predicted, it got some love, but it got some hate. Now, one or two people thought it looked hideous. Personally, I think it looks like a proper motorcycle, unlike that sort of squashed bug front end that Kawasaki in particular have specialized in recent years. And the other thing I'd say is it's a proper two-up machine too. Unlike recent bikes, the Trident springs to mind, having a passenger seat that you really couldn't balance a sandwich box on. Others said it was too heavy, but in defense, modern machines are weighed ready to roll rather than minus fluids and sometimes battery too. And they also come with catalyzers and ABS units, which of course all add to the weight. But most objections were over the 27 horsepower output, with suggestions about how poor the machine must be if 50 years of development can't produce a 500 single with more power than a 1980s XBR 500. Well, obviously you could, but emissions and noise, they take a toll. But the part of the rationale for this bike is it's a simple non-water cooled motor, and that will automatically restrict the power output. But ultimately, how fast do you want to roll? 27 horsepower will still crack the national speed limit. Now, I rather like the bike, and as I've said, if it appears at something like a half competitive price, I might be tempted to take a look at very least. Right, okay, let's have a quick look at the next picture, because this kind of tells you what I'm talking about here. Maybe we do rate power too highly as part of the riding experience these days, because here are two Salisbury riders who've just completed a 1,200-mile journey across Britain on these 100-year-old motorcycles. You're seeing Mike Tizard and Mark Goulding. They're members of the Salisbury Motorcycle and Light Car Club, and they raised more than £8,000 for charity during their rally centenary ride. So where did they go? They rode from London to Edinburgh on these vintage rally motorcycles, and interestingly, they followed the original 1926 ride produced which was completed by Marjorie Cottle, who was a works rally motorcycle rider 100 years ago. And the route spelled out rally across Britain. So well done to them. Right, okay. Let's have a quick look at the weather then. Now, the good news is that it did stay dry for these two riders, and it's likely to stay dry for the near future. What's happened to my picture? My picture's disappeared. Right, just a moment while I get that back. What went wrong there? There it is, weather forecast. So at least, as I say, stay dry for the rally riders. And for those of us who sit in the southern areas, which are now hit by a record-breaking 50-day drought, there's little sign of any immediate change. Plus, there will be another short heat wave as high pressure dominates the weather. What will happen is it will drift east. It'll start drawing up some very warm air indeed from continental Europe, lifting temperatures as much as 10 degrees above average for the time of year as it peaks on Wednesday into Thursday. So for today, there is a band of rain across Northern Ireland and Scotland. It's turning patchier as the day goes on, and it will become confined to southern Scotland and northern England, with just a few showers in the far north of Scotland. There'll be plenty of sun. It'll be dry elsewhere, temperatures in the high 20s across much of England, peaking at 31 in London. Now, apart from a few isolated showers in northern Scotland, Monday looks dry for virtually all the country. A few areas of cloud further north as you go, and possibly across parts of the south too. Under the cloud, it will be just a little bit cooler. Now, Tuesday could start cloudy in Scotland, but most of the UK will see yet more sun and temperatures widely into the high 20s again, with the warmer weather now starting to make it up into Scotland. Even Orkney, where I was a few days ago, will start seeing quite surprisingly warm temperatures. The far northwest of Scotland and the west coast of Northern Ireland is likely to have a breezy and showery day on Wednesday, but elsewhere skies are clear. Southerly breeze will bring the very warm weather across Wales and the majority of England. Now, that is the eclipse day, and just in case you had forgotten that or not noticed, between about 6 and 8 across the country, a partial eclipse of the sun will be visible. Remember not to look directly at the sun under any circumstances, and it will be something like a 90% eclipse, so it'll be fairly spectacular, I suspect. Anyway, that won't cool things down much. Heat's expected to peak on Thursday, then the temperatures will fall back a few degrees, but it remains warm and dry across the south of the UK right into the weekend. Okay, so let's get into the news. Now, the first story I have for you today is that motorcycles will now have a dedicated political lobby group within the European Parliament, following the launch of a cross-party motorcycling MEP club in Brussels on the 1st of July. The group brings together MEPs from different political parties who want powered two-wheelers to be properly considered when the EU talks about its future transport development schemes, the environment, as well as mobility and road safety policy. Now, the club won't have any formal legislative powers, but it does give the motorcycle industry and rider organisations something of a more direct channel into the political process, because they'll know basically who to talk to, and then these MEPs can put their points. So that's potentially quite significant as Europe continues to debate issues such as emissions, urban mobility, access restrictions, and vehicle technology, as well as, of course, road safety. These are all issues on which the UK remains broadly aligned with the EU. Now, an interesting new study has come out. It analysed more than 15,000 injured motorcyclists and cyclists at a major trauma centre in England and Wales between 2020 and 2022. And they also looked at injuries suffered by 580 e-scooter riders, the step scooters. And they found that the last group, suffered disproportionately severe injuries. Now, the study's lead author, a trauma surgeon called David Bodansky, he argues that the data demonstrates that e-scooters are not sort of the simple, slow and harmless urban transport how they're often portrayed. In fact, he said more than 1/3 of all adult e-scooter injuries involved the brain, and compared with motorcyclists, e-scooter riders were 3.5 times more likely to sustain a traumatic brain injury, which, as you probably guessed, is not unconnected with a failure to wear a helmet. Fewer than 6% of riders reported wearing one. There were also higher risks, more than 50 times more likely for e-scooter riders to suffer damage to internal organs, and almost twice as likely to suffer major arterial injuries. I don't know why that might be, but why did they come off in the first place? Well, the researchers suggested the small wheels, short wheelbase, limited stability, and the high riding position make the e-scooters vulnerable to potholes, curbs, and surface defects. And that, of course, added to their vulnerability in the event of a collision with another vehicle. So this is a significant problem, I would say, for the micro-mobility industry. If motorcycling is seen as uniquely dangerous, the steps have been taken. Riders undergo compulsory training in the UK. They wear compulsory protective headgear. They are encouraged strongly to wear other safety equipment, and they also ride vehicles which are not just built to rigorous standards, but also maintained to those standards. And generally speaking, motorcyclists, I would say, have a fair understanding of the risks. Look at the sort of people riding e-scooters, and there are very few who seem to take any attempt to protect themselves, and many are underage as well, very young. E-scooters are seen as casual products, so they're not regulated like motorcycles. And it's likely that proponents of micromobility have consistently underestimated or even downplayed the actual risks. Now, continuing on the safety theme, the government here in the UK is also considering a road safety shake-up at the moment. One of the proposals is to introduce significant new penalties for those who fail to get their vehicle MOT'd, and that could result in cars and motorcycles being seized at the roadside. Now, police forces and road safety bodies too, they have both expressed concern over the current lack of sanctions for the offence. In case you didn't know, it's not a sort of traffic offence. There's no points attached to it. There is just a fine. The Department of Transport is also contemplating upping the penalties for driving without insurance. Cases where a vehicle owner cannot be identified, the person photographed behind the wheel refuses, or the vehicle owner refuses to say who the person photographed behind the wheel might be. And also the use of ghost and cloned number plates. Now, carrying on the law breaking theme, a motorcyclist was detected by the same speed camera 36 times in a little over 2 months. You can work that out. It's basically once every 2 days. The offences were all recorded at the same location, and they did eventually result in a court appearance, a substantial fine, it said, and the driving ban. Don't know how long those were or how big the ban was, but the obvious question is this: how can someone actually get caught 36 times before action is taken? The rider appears simply to have carried on speeding past the camera despite repeated detections. Now, I know there's a timescale for sending out the summons, and there's a timescale for handing in your license and paying the fine, but something should have triggered in that system saying, hey, this is the same guy doing the same thing day after day. If the aim is that the camera is supposed to reduce casualties, then if the same rider is speeding past the same camera day in, day out, then the intervention simply isn't working in real time, is it? It's simply documenting the problem rather than actually doing anything to manage it. Right, okay, quick break while I have a sip of my tea. As always, can I ask you to take a moment to like and subscribe to this show if you've not already done so? Every click helps other motorcyclists discover my content, or simply share the word the old-fashioned way by telling your riding buddies about Elevenses. They can watch on catch-up. Remember, my latest riding skills articles are always free, and you can get all the links delivered weekly to your email inbox by subscribing to my newsletter at survivalskills.substack.com. Or you can use this QR code to jump straight to it, when the show's over of course. No spam, and if you don't like the content, unsubscribe at any time. Right, okay, on with some world and UK news in brief. Now, the first story here is that police have described social media posts that suggested a motorcyclist who was airlifted to hospital after a crash near Aberystwyth on Wednesday that claimed he had died as inaccurate and distressing. Now, Dyfed-Powys Police announced in a statement, "We can confirm that one person was taken to hospital where they are receiving treatment," but they urged people not to pass on posts of this nature. I take their point. I do my best to fact check stories before I post, and generally when I see a report of a collision involving a motorcyclist and an injury, I generally try to find the original police report on that, because there will have been a press release that's gone out to the newspapers. Now, over in Ireland, the Garda have cracked down on illegal e-mobility. They have seized no less than 166 e-bikes and e-scooters, 7 e-dirt bikes, 4 scrambler motorcycles and 3 quad vehicles. And these are all part of a major enforcement operation targeting the use of electric powered vehicles in crime. This is the long-running Operation Mikan, I've probably mangled the pronunciation there, launched in December 2023. They carried out 96 searches across the Dublin metropolitan region, and they led to the seizures of the vehicles, but also arrests, drug seizures, cash recovery, and the discovery of a sawn-off shotgun and ammunition. Now, London has just approved the first public robo-taxis to be operating, and Uber and the company Wave, who are British, they've been granted licenses by Transport for London to begin later this summer. Now, initially, there will still be a human safety driver behind the wheel, but the intention is to move towards fully driverless operation once the regulatory framework allows it. And so the first fleet will consist of 15 electric Ford and Mustang Mach-E's equipped with Wave's AI driving system. Now, here's a bike that certainly didn't have anything like an AI driving system. Let me give you a zoom in on that. It's the drought again. It's been busy across Europe, emptying rivers, and it's exposed wrecked World War II ships in the Danube. They do appear from time to time, but it's just revealed this for the first time since the war. It's a near intact Wehrmacht DKW NZ351 motorcycle, and it was found on the bed of the Danube in the heart of Hungary's capital, Budapest, near the Hungarian Parliament building. Now, according to the local institute and the Ministry, or the Museum, I should say, of Military History, the machine is almost completely intact, and it's been preserved in the Danube's mud. The DKW, it was developed specifically for wartime use by Auto Union, and around 12,000 units were actually built from 1944 when it went into production to the end of the war in 1945. Okay, another quick break. If you enjoy these shows, why not become a member of my Ko-fi pages? Just follow the QR code and sign up. As a member, you get free access to the latest articles and the Survival Skills ebook shop with instant downloads of everything from free mini ebooks to ebook versions of my paperbacks. Become a one-off supporter and you'll open up the archive of over 1,000 articles. If you buy me a monthly cuppa as a subscriber, there's even more content to enjoy. Right, so I just want to give a quick shout out to the supporters from last week. Howard, Nick, James, Barry, Hal and Peter. He downloaded some of my mini ebooks from my Ko-fi pages, and for Anonymous too, of course. So thank you all very much indeed, and I hope you have enjoyed the content. Right, okay, so moving on rapidly, we'll look at some news about bikes and bike technology. Where's my image gone? I've lost my pictures. Where are they gone? Here they are. Right, okay. So let's get that up on the screen. There we go. More news about Ducati. Now, over the last few weeks, there have been rumors circulating that Ducati could be sold off by the parent company, Volkswagen Group. Now, that I mentioned in the last show that an Italian company named Patritalia, they're a sort of an Italian investment company, they've announced that they have made a 2.5 billion euro bid for Ducati with the aim, they say, of bringing the company back into Italian ownership. Now, it was met with a degree of skepticism across the industry generally, because nobody's ever heard of this company before, plus silence from Ducati. Now, Patritalia have repeated this claim, and they've also published a bunch of AI-generated images showing a sort of proposed MotoGP, Moto2 and Moto3 bikes, all in their sort of their Ducati Patritalia livery. But they've also added that every bike will have an Italian rider. Now, there was and there remains no response from either direct owners Audi or from the Volkswagen group that owns that particular car manufacturer. Now, what we do know is that Ducati isn't standing still under their current ownership, because the manufacturer has just announced a major 121 million euros, just over 100 million pounds, an investment program called Ducati Raise the Bar, which is aimed at strengthening its research, development and technological innovation capabilities. Now, more than 99 million of those euros will go directly into the industrial research and experimental development department, and the stated goals are to expand Ducati's product range, to develop new sustainable technologies, and to improve the manufacturing process. Now, Ducati says the investment will help maintain its position as a global technology leader while supporting Italy's Motor Valley, their engineering sector. Now, significantly, around 33.5 million euro is actually coming directly from the Italian government, where it is being delivered to them as a non-repayable grant. So just over a quarter of the total investment. All right, let's have a look at a slightly different way of looking at motorcycles. Let me give you a zoom-in view on that one as well, in case you're wondering what it is. Now, if the Ducati investment is aimed at engineering, Norton seems to be going in a rather different direction, and they have invested in showcasing the bike. So this is the new Norton Pavilion. It's a modular showroom concept, which presumably means you can roll them up next to each other or back to back or put them side by side. But they're designed to go into what Norton say is up to 200 locations worldwide. Now, it's developed in collaboration with Foster and Partners. It might be better known for developing sort of buildings like the new Wembley Stadium. And it's intended to make buying a Norton, and this is what worries me, an experience rather than simply a transaction for a new bike. Now, we've all seen this movie before, haven't we? You know, you create an aspirational motorcycle, you give it lifestyle branding, you go for a rapid expansion. The 200 dealer network is particularly ambitious, given that Norton only had 10 official dealers or thereabouts as recently as last year. What usually follows, of course, and we've seen this many times, is that buyers vote with their feet rather than their wallets. The cash remains firmly in the pocket or bank account, and the company implodes. Bimota, MV Agusta, Confederate that became Curtis, they've all been down this road. Yes, Norton have significant backing from TVS, but there is something that I don't get with this plan, because Norton have stated recently that they want to keep the prices of most of their bikes relatively mainstream, and they want to establish a broad sales base. Now, a luxury retail environment perhaps could make a sort of £10,000 motorcycle feel more special, but it's really not obvious why that requires a luxury retail outlet. Now, despite the backing of TVS, I'd say first and foremost, Norton actually needs to show it can generate wider customer acceptance and not just niche sales. Remember, the Stuart Garner era, Norton has had to be scrapped completely because of unreliability, and that TVS found they simply couldn't re-engineer it. So they've had to build a new bike from the ground up. And that will be their flagship bikes, but it's their twins, which will be the bread and butter, I would have thought. So they need volume and they need margins to stay profitable. So even if the bikes do sell strongly and they do sell from these units, then I'll admit I was wrong and that it was just clever branding. But if they don't, then investing in this sort of premium brand infrastructure does start to look like a sort of overreach that's doomed other luxury brands. Right, okay, here's a bike that you won't be able to buy on the road anytime soon, because the Mule E, MUL.E, it isn't a road bike. It's a military vehicle that's technically interesting because it uses 2 electric motors. One drives each wheel, so it gives it permanent 2-wheel drive. Now, this has been tried before with all sorts of complex transmission solutions to cope with the steerable front end of a motorcycle. But the obvious advantage of a hub motor is it only needs to be fed electric power. Now, the bike also carries a small removable petrol generator. Now, that's not there to drive the bike directly, but it can recharge the batteries in the field, and it can also provide power for radios, phones, and drones, that kind of thing. So the motorcycle also becomes a lightweight and mobile power source for the battlefield. Now, both Ukraine and Russia have increasingly been relying on lightweight motorcycles because they're harder to detect than larger trucks. They can cross difficult terrain impassable to those vehicles, and they're somewhat less vulnerable to drones too. Even big armored vehicles have had trouble being hit by drones because they're quiet and they have a minimal heat signature, particularly the electric ones, of course. So Ukraine has already ordered around 1,500 military motorcycles this year. So it does show they're part of sort of mainstream battlefield logistics. Which brings me to a bike that you will find, at least in Spanish showrooms at the moment. I'll just give you a zoom-in view on this one as well. You may recall the brand Bultaco. Now, when I was getting into bikes, they're well known for creating some sort of pretty feisty off-road competition machines. But they also built a few road legal bikes. However, the original factory in Barcelona, it closed down in 1983, and it seemed that Bultaco had joined the long list of defunct European brands. But it seems they've now joined a different list, the only slightly shorter one of defunct brands that have been reinvented. Now, the Bultaco name was relaunched in 2014 around a range of electric bicycles and lightweight off-road products, but this ICE-powered motorcycle with the name on the tank has just appeared. Now, it does appear that the Bultaco Rally GT300, as it's announced to be, is actually a rebadged version of the Lennart Rally 300, and this was launched earlier in 2026. I don't think I covered that bike. Now, Lennart, or however that's pronounced, says its bikes are designed and developed in Spain, but manufactured and assembled in China. And just a little digging reveals that the motor is actually sourced from CF Moto. So it's a 292 single-cylinder engine. It produces 28 horsepower, so remarkably similar to that Honda 500 we saw earlier. 25 Newton meters. It drives via a 6-speed gearbox. The bike has a 19-inch front wheel, 17-inch rear, I believe. The front has a healthy 240 millimeter suspension travel, and there's 260 millimeters of ground clearance. No word on the seat height, but you do get 16 liters of fuel in the tank, which should take it a fair distance. 150 kilograms, presumably ready to ride, and it does come with ABS, a 5-inch TFT display, don't they all, and even a built-in dash cam. Now, the current price for the Lennart is around €3,599. So it will be interesting to see if the Bultaco gets the same price, a more premium tag, because it is a better known name. Right, okay, so over to the final part of the show today, where I take a look at something in depth or technical, something practical to improve your riding. So what's today's story? Well, I mentioned Colin Brown from MAG the other day. Colin's been very busy on YouTube recently, and his latest video is a self-confessed rant on the problem he says that arises when some people within road safety think motorcycling doesn't fit. Now, Colin, not unreasonably, points out the flaw in this argument. If the safe system scheme can't accommodate motorcycling, then maybe it's the safe system scheme that needs to change. Now, if you are interested, you can head over to this link here, which I'm just about to pop up on screen. Here we go. That's the link to Colin's video. You'll find it with a quick search on the MAG channel anyway, I'm sure. Now, I've got a fair amount of sympathy for Colin's viewpoint, because I've spent the last few months, you may know, working on my brand new M6 framework for learning riding skills. And the final article in that sequence was an explainer that looks back on just how rider training sits within the modern approach to safety generally. Now, the problem is that for all the talk of safe systems and Vision Zero, we're still essentially stuck in a 50s framework of engineering, education, and enforcement. I've just read an article, in fact, that talks about how the police need to enforce safety on drivers to make cycling safer, for example. It's the 1950s all over again. And until we make a really conscious effort, genuine effort to revise the way we think about this sort of blame culture, move away from it, nothing much is likely to change. Now, if you want to read about my thinking, it was published on my own coffee page. It went up on Facebook too. Here's the link to it on the archive, the coffee archive. Go and take a look if you want to and have a read of that. Now, a modern approach to safety has moved on from this 3 E's. I mean, it's still got a place in the safety sort of schema, but it doesn't dominate it anymore. The modern approach to understanding safety is to look at how errors arise and look at how to correct them. And that's the approach that the airlines have taken, for example. This is what creates real safety, not the sort of mythical perfect ride approach. If you want to find out more about this, you can do worse and look at my crash scene ebooks, which feature the sort of standard gotchas, junctions, corners, and overtaking. Or if you really want to be challenged, you can find the next online course, which will start in September, over on my www.motoonline.co.uk website. That's nice, easy to remember, isn't it? Anyway, this all segues neatly into a post I picked up on LinkedIn from the Connected Motorcycle Consortium, which talked about the "sorry mate, I didn't see you" motorcycle collision with a driver. And they stated, and I quote, "I didn't see them may not be a line of sight problem. When a left turn collision occurs," a right turn in the UK that is, of course, and in other countries where we drive on the left, "the common explanation is that the driver couldn't see. The CMC accidentology data suggests that may be incomplete in 4 out of 5 cases. In accident type 211, when they give you a reference here to some research, and the turning vehicle is a passenger car or light van in over 90% of the cases, and the main causer in almost all of these. Explicit view obstruction from the driver's perspective was present in less than 18% of cases." So that means in 4 out of 5 cases, the line of sight was clear. The driver could have seen the motorcycle. And get this, the failure was human attention, not geometry. Right, so let's break that down. Now, first of all, this explanation, the common explanation is that the driver couldn't see. That's simply not in line with the research. That is not the common explanation. The police crash investigations, the most common contributory factor that's been quoted for decades is "didn't look properly." I don't believe the police explanation is right either, as it happens, but it doesn't make the CMC claim correct either. Now, let's emphasize this bit as well. Explicit view obstruction from the driver's perspective was present in less than 18% of cases. So that means in 4 out of 5 cases, the line of sight was clear. I don't disagree. It's actually in line with the data that I have discovered during my research for the science of being seen, which actually makes me wonder where the CMC found their figures. So that means in 4 out of 5 cases, the line of sight was clear. I'm going to repeat that again. The driver could see the motorcycle. The attention was human attention, not geometry. All right, let's just reframe that then. 4 out of 5 cases, the line of sight was clear. That still means, flip the numbers round, in 1 of 5 cases, the line of sight was blocked. Now, it's the same data talking, but a very different way of looking at it. So what are you going to do if you think you can't be seen by a driver? Are you going to rely on the fact that it's only a 1 in 5 chance as you approach a junction, or are you going to do something about it for yourself? Now, the other 4 out of 5 collisions, I spent a decade now talking about the limitations of the human visual perception system, and the issues such as motion camouflage, contrast, and disruptive camouflage. There are instances, of course, of initial incorrect assessment of speed and distance, which leads to an error in calculating what's called timed collision, which leads to the driver starting to pull out when they shouldn't. The other half of the coin here is the poor advice given to riders to rely on conspicuity aids to be seen. Now, this is poor advice because it doesn't seem to have had any effect. Riders wearing high vis and using lights are still regularly involved in the "sorry mate, I didn't see you" collisions. So the advice falls short of reminding riders to look out for their own safety. Now, what's never stated in many of these couldn't see the bike instance, this is the sort of 1 in 5 where the bike was actually out of sight of the driver. The motorcycle rider could often see the car in that run up to the collision. How often do you look at a vehicle and think, actually, there's somebody standing on the pavement directly in line with the driver. They can't see me, but I can see the car. This entire discussion about didn't look properly, couldn't see the car, excuse me, couldn't see the bike, is the wrong end of the stick. These collisions happen because the rider rode into the crash too. Excuse me, I forgot to take my antihistamine tablet this morning. So my worry about articles like this is that they encourage bikers to think that the driver looks properly, then the accident is eliminated. But that brings us back to this 1 in 5 figure, where the driver can't see the bike, no matter how hard they look. Is that a odds that you want to gamble with each time you approach a junction? Not for me, it isn't. Now, the CMC actually has some history on this. 5 years ago, they stated that motorcycle safety relies on being seen by others. Now, it's actually the rationale they're using to push their concept of wireless communication between vehicles to help detect dangerous situations, I quote, earlier than the human eye. There's nothing wrong with getting that wireless assist, but it doesn't mean that in the meantime, we still have to rely on the driver looking properly or even being aware that there's a blind spot in what they're looking at to stay safe. With or without connected vehicles, safety starts with us as a rider scanning our own environment. Okay, that's it. So time to wrap up for today. As I mentioned, the e-learning course, if you are interested in something which will really challenge you. I've been getting some very, very positive feedback from the course. I know it won't be everybody's cup of tea, but you can do it anywhere. You can do it in your own time, take as long as you want. It's nominally 8 weeks because it's 8 sections. Each section consists of 8 to 10 modules. There are a mix of theory, questions to get you thinking. There are videos to assess. And there are also some cunningly designed practical exercises that you can try out on the road in person. Plenty of interaction as you upload your responses and I comment on that. You can even upload your own on-bike videos if you want to. Each course gets 2 online webinar style meetings to discuss how you're getting on. And there's an informative 9th week as well for free when you get to the end of it. So, how much is that? £119 at the moment. That's not much more than the cost of a tank of fuel, or even these days, it's the cost of a breakfast on your Sunday morning ride out. So motoonline.co.uk, info's all on there. That's it for today. Thanks to everybody who has looked in either live or will look in on catch up. This has been Elevenses. You've been watching Kevin Williams from Survival Skills Rider Training. So make a date to join me on the next show for another roundup of news, views and biking tips. And if you are out there on your bike today enjoying the ride, why not if you're here in the UK? Make sure you stay shiny side up, and I will see you for the next show.